frogs and the spikes. Okay. So we'll get started. I just wanted to welcome everyone to the Firehouse. Thank you for spending your Sunday with us. My name is Elaine Waterman. I'm the executive director here at the Firehouse Art Center. And the Firehouse Art Center is a nonprofit art center that is located in downtown Longmont. We like to think of ourselves as the creative cornerstone of Longmont. And we offer art exhibits, art education, and cultural events. These artist talks are just our way of getting to chat with artists, curators, and members of the creative community, as well as creative entrepreneurs with a focus on how to build community within the arts. Firehouse Artist Talks give the community a chance to ask questions and get to a deeper level with the art on our walls. We are taping this talk. Just wanted to make sure, yes, we are. We are taping this talk, and you can find it on our YouTube channel, along with our past artist talks and presentations. I did want to start with a couple of updates from the Firehouse Art Center. So we have life drawing tomorrow and every Monday from 6 to 8. We have poetry night the last Friday of the month, writer's workshop the third Fridays of the month, play with clay, and then also as far as specific events, we have the Day of the Dead Family Fiesta coming up in downtown Longmont October 12th from 11 to 3, which will actually be the opening of our next exhibit. And then the Katrina Ball, which is happening October 19th at the Firehouse and in the area around the Firehouse from 4:30 to 8:30. I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsors, the LDDA, Longmont Creative District, SCFD, which is Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, the Longmont Community Foundation, the Community Foundation of Boulder, the Boulder County Arts Alliance, and to Colorado Creative Industries. We couldn't connect our community to creative and life-changing art experiences without your help. If you would like to donate to support our programming and exhibits, please visit our website at firehouseart.org. And lastly, in the spirit of healing, the Firehouse acknowledges and honors the Arapaho tribe, the original people of the land upon which the Firehouse sits. We also wish to acknowledge all other indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. It is because of their hardships and sacrifices that we are able to be here sharing this art with you today. And the Firehouse believes that we can only grow when we have a better appreciation for the history, legacy, and contributions the tribes have made, not just to this region, but to the nation. And I'm excited to be here today with our artist in residence, Erica Podwoiski. The Firehouse Art Center hosts 2 residencies each year, working in the South Gallery for 2 or 3 months before a culminating solo exhibition in the main gallery, with the opportunity to guest curate the accompanying South Gallery. The Artist Occupied program at the Firehouse Art Center is intended as a professional development opportunity for emerging and experienced visual artists. We hope that it brings their work to a new creative level, while also connecting our visitors to working artist environments and processes. Erica is a visual artist whose work explores intimate encounters with the natural world. Born and raised in Metro Detroit, Erica received a BFA from the Columbus College of Art and Design in 2010 and her MFA from the University of Colorado Boulder in 2017. She is exhibited at the Gallery of Contemporary Art in Colorado Springs, inside the Denver-based pop-up art truck Hey Hugh at the Gallery im Corner Park in Berlin, and with the artist-founded Buckham Gallery in Flint, Michigan. When not teaching adult classes in the 2D arts, Erica can be found pressing flowers, appreciating moths, and collecting dead bugs for inspiration. And I wanted to, Erica wanted to start out with a poem to get the artist talk started.
So this is actually a footnote in the book The Far Away Nearby by Rebecca Solnit, and I just feel like it kind of sets the tone for this exhibit, and it kind of draws on a lot of the things I was thinking about when I was making the show. So, moths drink the tears of sleeping birds. The birds sleep on, inadvertent givers. The moths fly on, enriched. We feed on sorrows, on stories, on the spaciousness they open up when they let us travel in our imagination beyond our own limits, when they dissolve the boundaries that confine us and urge us to extend the potentialities of our imperfect, broken, incomplete selves. Those apricots my brother brought me in the 3 big cardboard boxes long ago, were they tears too? And this book, is it tears? Who drinks your tears? Who has your wings? Who hears your story?
So this exhibit you titled Blue Whispers, which obviously comes from the use of the medium cyanotype, but also from the subject matter. So what is a whisper?
So a whisper can be a group of moths. And I wanted to have sort of a double meaning when I was choosing my title, and I went through so many iterations. How do I use blue or dusk? And then I came across this fact that a group of moths can be called an eclipse, a universe, or a whisper. And I felt like the resonance of this show, like the colors and the theme, it felt like it was a whisper. So I ended up like crowdsourcing and talking to my sister, who has a degree in creative writing, and she consulted with her poet friend, and her poet friend was like, okay, of all of these like bullet points, lists of word combinations, blue whispers. And so I just left it at that. I think it kind of gets at the tone and the moths, and it's blue. And blue has, of course, so many connotations emotionally. I'm also very, very inspired by a book by William Gass called On Being Blue. And he just talks about the color blue as wordplay. So that's kind of how I arrived at the title.
Very cool. And as far as cyanotypes, so if you don't know what that is, cyanotypes were invented by Sir John Herschel in 1842. They are photographs, a different kind of photographic process with a distinctive blue tonality produced by treating paper with an iron salt solution. The treated paper is then developed using only the sun, and then what is created is a 1-to-1 scale documentation of the printed object. So a big part of creating cyanotypes, not only is it a specific moment in time, because you're actually like placing something and then it records that. So it's a specific moment in time, but there are also specific amounts of time that are needed to expose the cyanotype. How fussy is that process? And can you kind of give us more information of how you do it?
Yeah, so my experience with cyanotype, it started off during the pandemic, as a lot of hobbies did. I know a lot of people got into baking and bread, and I got into cyanotype. I wanted to do something that was outdoors. I felt like I needed something that would tie me to the rhythms of the world. I felt very much like, I don't know, I think a lot of us felt like we were sort of in free fall. So it was a grounding activity for me. And when I started, I very much started in earnest with a $12 kit from Jacquard products that they're pretty ubiquitous. They make like all the very accessible cyanotype solutions. So I got a kit. And when I started, I was just, like you said, placing things onto the paper, exposing it. And in the beginning, I just read the bottle, which said anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, which is a big window of time. And what I realized very quickly is that this is Colorado. So like 5 minutes on a sunny day at noon will get you a great print. That said, you have to pay attention to what the light is doing. So if it's not a perfectly clear day and you have a cloud that passes by, you will have variation, and your edges can vary so much depending on how direct is the light, again, what time of day it is. I eventually realized 12 noon is like if you want perfectly crisp edges and a very, very clear print, 12 o'clock, perfect. You have straightforward overhead light. But what I also realized, because I'm someone who likes to push it to the boundaries, and sometimes I wouldn't have time to make a cyanotype until 4 or 5 p.m. as the sun was setting and the angles were different. What I realized is that I could get more, say, like faded or dreamlike prints when the edges were softer and the light was hitting it in a different way. So now I have this window where, depending on what I want, if I want very clear images, I can do that at noon, but if I want something a little different, I can wait longer. There's so much variability, and I think that's what I find so exciting about it. As an artist, I feel like I need some kind of surprise in the process and a little bit of a loss of control. So you are collaborating with the elements. There have been times too where it just started raining, like sunny day, and then I get raindrops. Oh, and then the raindrops show up in the print, and it's this amazing, happy accident. Or a bug flies on something and lands and ends up being part of the print.
So I know that during your residence here, you also had workshops, and I was able to take one, and I do have a personal, I'd never done cyanotypes before, and it was a very Goldilocks kind of experience that I had. So my first one, I had underexposed. My next one, I had overexposed, and everyone's like, "Oh, and then your third one was perfect."
Yep.
But then I'm like, "Oh no, I had to leave, so I didn't get to do it." but yeah, that was a very it was an interesting interplay of time and patience, and then all of that. But speaking of time, though, how does time kind of relate to your subject matter as well?
So I think cyanotype, the nature of it is very site-specific, and it is so dependent on time. And photography is very much about capturing a moment in time. That said, with this show, I was basing pretty much all of my pieces on either first-hand experiences of nature, like in real time. Okay, I went and I saw this moth, I took a picture, and then I reproduced it, I drew it, or memory, because some of these images I haven't actually experienced. It's more like tapping into a memory. And I think with this piece, the larger piece in particular, that piece, everything in it, this is something someone actually commented on during my exhibition opening. It's like this dichotomy of, you have this scene that's teeming with life, and yet everything in it is actually dead or no longer living. So a lot of the plants, I plucked them from the ground, and I'm exposing them, and you're getting a silhouette, an impression, kind of like a fossil of something that it existed in time. But now, the amaranth that I printed is long since, decayed and composted. The images of the animals, that rabbit's still somewhere kicking alive, hopefully. But a lot of it is that kind of, you're seeing something that maybe existed at some point in time, but may not any longer. And I think that kind of ties back to a lot of this work as being sort of like a meditation on death. And I'm fascinated by this idea that when a life form, whether it's a person or an animal, goes from life to death, they end up sort of becoming a memory or a dream. And I'm someone who has very vivid dreams, so I'm able to access people that I've lost through dreams. So I see a lot of these as being very dreamlike yeah, there's the nature of cyanotype, which is very time-based, but these now live on as sort of like new iterations.
Cool. And I know that a lot of people in the community brought you dead animals, I guess, and dead bugs and dead flowers and things like that.
Yep.
When you are creating your cyanotypes, I know you said that when you first started out, it was like very simple. You just put one item there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you create the image? Do you kind of already have an idea based on the elements, or do the elements you just kind of start layering them and then they talk to each other? What do you usually do?
I tend to start with some kind of vague vision of what I want, and then I will ask myself, would it be better as a drawing? Is it something that I want to draw? Because a lot of this work is a mix of drawing and actual physical objects and like found pieces or pieces that people donated. And I have a drawing and painting background. I love drawing. So any opportunity I can get to draw, I will, and I like incorporating that. But I also like experimenting with the cyanotype and getting parts to look a little bit more vague, or a little bit less clear. So it's usually a question of what is the focal point, you know, what do I really want to bring out, and should I do it with drawing, or do I have this amazing specimen that I can build off of?
Mm-hmm.
So like the mummified squirrel that Diane brought me from the rooftop, that unfortunate squirrel ended up like being the starting point, and then it was like, oh, where should it go? How should I build around it? So it's lots of little pieces and parts, and usually it's like, well, is it going to start as a drawing, or do I have, again, like I found a lot of things on the farm where I live. I happened to come across, you know, like a squashed toad. I'm like, well, that would be perfect in a pile of leaf litter. So it's a combination of kind of like what do I want to get across, and then what do I want to draw versus, and how much detail do I want? Because I can get more detail with drawing versus like a silhouette of an object.
So you said that you have a background in drawing and painting, so that's two-dimensional. As far as like cyanotyping, I see that you brought, you know, more experimentation into the process by changing up the substrate.
Yes.
So can you talk about how that process was?
Yeah. Well, I was so excited when I got this residency because I knew I was going to have the opportunity just working in a space and having just more space to spread out in. I knew I wanted to try silk. I knew I wanted to engage this space, and I wanted to try to make things bigger and, you know, just kind of experiment. So just having this show in mind, it was like, I'm going to go bigger. I'm going to try silk. And that was like such a process. I knew I wanted to print a willow tree. My partner actually trimmed a willow tree for me, and it was a whole ordeal of laying out this fabric, but having it covered, because as soon as you're exposing it to the sun, it's going to start to turn blue. So this whole configuration with this tree, it was set out, ripped off a cover, and we carefully like replaced it on the silk. And that was just exciting to see, like, oh, there's, you know, different feeling that's created depending on, you know, how gauzy and ethereal is the substrate. Like silk does something different, and it moves when you pass it, which is really interesting to me. And, you know, paper, I had already done a lot with paper. But then it was like, well, can I like engage the floor in some way? I want to do a floor piece. So then it was like, well, let's cut out the paper. And also, okay, rocks are porous, so anything porous should take cyanotype. So I started cyanotyping rocks. And a lot of those rocks I just stealthily collected from around town. if anybody's wondering where, I just mainly went for like big piles. And I've, trial and error, found out that sandstone works really well with rocks. And then again, like with the fabric, I think fabric allows you to work a lot larger. And so like this backdrop, like this was another kind of experimental thing. And yeah, just branching out with materials, I think it allowed me to get different effects that I hadn't achieved before. And even like the mixed media moon, which has embroidered moth on top of it. That was a collaboration. That was something I probably wouldn't have done had I not been in this residency, just as a way to branch out. So.
And so these silk panels, because we're looking right at them, and I know, like the two to the side, you can see the willow branches quite clearly. And then the middle one, I was like, it's like the surface of the moon. But what is that? How did you get that effect? How was that? I know.
Yeah, no, how did I actually get that? And that's why it's so, like, this was so awesome to be in this residency and to have other voices and opinions and feedback, because I wouldn't have seen that. When I first printed that, it was actually me attempting to get the texture of bark on a tree, and I took it out and I laid it on top of a big fallen tree, and I sprayed it with water, and I threw cyanotype like solution at it, and it looked amazing at the time. For whatever reason, it picked up some of the color of the bark, and it was orange, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be so cool, it's gonna look like a tree. Then I rinsed it underwater, which is the final step of processing, and all the orange went away, and I set it aside. I'm like, this is a failure, I'm not gonna use this. And then when I saw them together, and what you said about it feeling like the lunar surface, I was like, oh yeah, that's actually, like, I love it. Okay, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna just incorporate it into the space. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was very, very experimental and not what I thought I was gonna get, but it became something else. And I love when that happens in the process of making something. You have an idea, and it goes in a completely different direction.
Mm-hmm. As far as like lunar and moon and kind of the cycle of moths, I know that you had a Mothapalooza.
Yes,
two.
This is Mothapalooza 2.
So what is that? And can you talk about like, what is it where it's not like moth watchers? What are they called?
Mothers.
Mothers. Okay.
Yes.
So what is the Mothapalooza?
So the first Mothapalooza, I partnered with a filmmaker named Yan Chun-Soo, and she has been mothing for years. On a more professional level, I consider myself very amateur, but I was partnered through a local environmental organization, Cool Boulder, and it was through an exhibition that was at the Boulder Public Library called Little Creatures, which was a show about bugs. So I staged the first one at Sunflower Farm in Longmont last summer. And mothing, if you're not familiar with this subculture and phenomenon, is essentially the attraction and the observation and maybe like the citizen scientist documentation of moths. So all you need to do to be a mother is to set out UV lights and then just watch them come. And I typically will set out like a white sheet so you have something for them to land on. So you just direct some light, add a sheet, and then if it's a clear, not windy, relatively warm summer night, you will get moths. And then you can take pictures of them. They're like, iNaturalist is a citizen scientist project where you can upload pictures of moths and share your findings.
Did it work?
It did work. I actually have some people here in the audience who attended, and we saw some moths. It was interesting because I tried a few different lights this time, and some of the lights didn't attract any, and then my cheap UV black light from college attracted like hundreds. So it was cool. And you get different moths appearing at different times of the night. We got some that I'd never seen before, like little orange moths, and the diversity is really amazing. So I think that's what keeps me intrigued.
That's so cool because obviously cyanotype, you need the sun, and then the moths come out with the moon. So it's kind of like playing with two different sides.
Yeah.
Of coin, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. So you did mention that you moved to a farm, and I do know from your bio that you are from Detroit, which I do not equate with like nature, I guess. So how does how did that shape, I guess, where you came from, or maybe where you are now, your relationship to nature now?
Oh, yeah. So I want to be very clear because people from Michigan, I'm from Metro Detroit. I'm from a suburb of Detroit. But Detroit for me was like the hub for art, culture. That's where I would go as a kid, to the Detroit Institute of the Arts. Like that was the source of culture, food, entertainment, everything. Growing up, we lived in suburbia, like world's first Kmart. This is Garden City, Michigan. So world's first Kmart, world's first sit-down McDonald's. I don't want to botch that. Very specific. So not a ton of nature, but my mom was an avid gardener. And our backyard was sort of an oasis, like in suburban, like just cement sprawl chain stores. So I did have access on this very small scale. She was like so amazing with gardening. She built just a beautiful garden that we would hang out in the summer. But then we also would travel up. I have relatives on my mom's side in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So if you drive like 12 hours north, you're in like no man's land, and it's very remote and very beautiful, and the lakes were very much a part of me growing up. But yeah, nature was not like a big part of my daily life most months of the year. And moving here, I think a large reason I came to Colorado from I was in Columbus, and then I was back in Metro Detroit. A large reason was the nature and just having a place to go to grad school that would be sort of like contemplative and beautiful. And yeah, I feel like it's really important to me now. Living on a farm, like surrounded by toads and peacocks and flowers, and it's just like I don't know if I could go back to living in a very urban environment, especially drawing so much inspiration from nature. So it's it's something I don't know if I could give it up at this point. But I love cities too. I mean, I love the culture and the art and the excitement and the nightlife and all that, but there's something very grounding, and I don't know, I think as humans, we need nature.
Yeah. And you mentioned your mother, and I know this large piece was kind of about your mom. Do you want to talk about this piece right here?
Yeah. So it's titled "Look for Me in the Flowers." And that is something my mom said to me and my sister. This was like the last year of her life in the summer of 2018, and then she passed away in 2019 from breast cancer. And I felt for a long time like I wanted to make something that would honor her memory in some way. I know this is very removed from Michigan and from her garden, and that's something I would like to attempt at some point. Like, I feel like that's really important for me to go back to that garden, which is still, it's like totally out of control and lush now, like in a wild secret garden kind of way. So I want to do that at some point. But this was really about channeling, I think, her spirit. She was very, I would say she moved through the world with a sense of wonder, and she just loved life and loved nature. And there are moments in it that, again, are kind of like I don't know if this was a formative memory with her or if it's something that I'm imagining based on a story she told me. But I have this memory of, which I question, is it a memory, is it a fabrication, of seeing a cecropia moth in the backyard. So I wove cecropia moths in there, which I've never seen here in person, but I know they travel through this space. And I see them in my dreams very frequently. They remind me of my mom. So this is kind of like, it's a memorial to her in a way, on a personal level. But it's all based on just me moving through the world and noticing things in my immediate surroundings. It's all based on stuff that was found here. And I just feel like that's something she instilled in me and my sister, is this like appreciation for nature. Look for me in the flowers. So I look for signs and symbols, as like a non-religious person. I don't know, I feel like there's still something mysterious and beautiful in nature that I don't know, it just keeps her memory alive for me.
Yeah, definitely. So you spoke about teaching, and I know that you teach a lot of different things, but teaching seems to be a very important part of your creative life. When did you decide that you wanted to share what you knew and share your knowledge?
Honestly, I feel like I've been doing that like as long as I've been an artist. If I'm excited about something, I'll share it with my family, with my friends. Like, who wants to get together and do cyanotypes? Like, I think there's something really rewarding, and it's like a feedback loop. Like, I get a lot out of teaching. I don't think students or just people that I work with, like, I don't know if they realize how much I get out of it. So I think, just going through art school and then grad school, I had opportunities to teach, actually during both my undergraduate and grad studies. And I think just in general, there's something really fulfilling about sharing what I know. Like, I feel like I have a responsibility. It's just, I don't want to create in a vacuum, and I don't want to keep all this to myself. I feel like it's more fun to share it. And then, of course, like, in a selfish way, I get ideas from students. I get ideas when I'm teaching, and I feel like it's really important, and it's cool to see, people that I've worked with, just to see their growth over time, to see them make discoveries. And I just feel like art making is so important and so undervalued in our society. So just being a proponent for, an advocate for the arts, I like to get people hooked on art if I can.
And do you have a mentor that helped you expand your practice or helped you become the artist that you are?
That's a good question. I feel like I've had so many really good teachers, and just like examples of people who are working as artists, who are making it happen. And I think just like most recently, I feel like being in this space, like, you've been incredible to work with. Like previous artists in residence, Mackenzie, I feel like also, just getting into the space and meeting you was really, really helpful. In grad school, I had an amazing advisor, Francoise Duress, and she was also just really supportive, really encouraging, and also just like tuned into what I wanted to do, in a way that, I feel like sometimes, I don't know, my work, some of it can be a little bit more risque, I would say, like my figurative art, which is a totally different branch from this and what I did here. But yeah, I feel like just, she was wonderful to work with. She's like, even like back in like high school, Miss Rappin, my high school art teacher, she was so awesome. And Miss Motora, the two of them kind of taught art, like off, they like switched off. And really it was the two of them. When I was in high school, they instilled Figure Friday, where we would all take turns being models, like being in a public school where we're not a lot of funding. So it's like we were the models. We would model for each other, clothed, but still it felt like kind of subversive, and it totally like drove me into this like fascination with figure drawing, which is still a big part of my practice. So I feel like it, and then of course, like my parents were very supportive. I was very lucky there. Yeah, there's so many other people, but that's just like a short list of top of my head. And yeah, there've been a lot. Very cool.
And I know that you worked with the teens in Studio Project for Big Mama as well.
Yeah.
What did you guys do? You did figure drawing with them too?
Yeah, we did. So we actually, they wanted to make a show about bodies, which of course, you know, like when you're a teenager and, you know, like forever, like body acceptance and different body types and bodies in media and, you know, social pressures and representation, that was what they wanted to focus on. So I was brought in, and we ended up doing both zines that were about their experiences with their own bodies. One person did a zine about getting a botched like spray tan and ended up like being orange and talking about that, and someone else did like a book of insecurities, and it was just like really awesome to see that side of it. And then we crowdsourced on Craigslist. We had people submit images of their bodies, including like pregnant bodies, older bodies, like just all different types of bodies, and we did ink paintings.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it was like a kind of subversive show.
Yeah.
Glad we got away with it, because it was cool and very inspiring. Like they were such driven, like precocious, ambitious teens. So that was cool to work with.
It's a great age to work with. As far as the residency, so the Firehouse has 2 residencies a year, one in the summer, one in the winter. Just as a message to people, because we are going to be opening up the application process again, do you have any kind of comments on how you prepare to apply and anything to share about the process?
Yeah, I first visited the Firehouse Art Center in 2020, and I was able to talk to Barbara Rudloff, who was the artist in residence at the time. And I was really just visiting, like, oh, I need to check this space out. And she was very, just very encouraging. Like, this is awesome. You should do this. Just,
you know, the space.
Yeah, and she's like, just find a way to engage the community. Like, if you can do that through a project, then you should apply. And I think it took me a little bit of time, just to form this project, and it was something that was brewing, but I needed to kind of work through, well, how could I make this more of a community project, and what could I offer the community in terms of like workshops or collaboration. So I think doing that, and then also attending Mackenzie Davis's papermaking workshop, that was very inspiring. I was like, oh, like, I want to do something like this, like, and I really wanted to share cyanotype in some workshop form, and I usually teach in the evenings, so yeah, having space and time in the afternoon to share that. I visited the space, you know, talked to some previous artists in residence, and I looked at past shows and, you know, did some research just to see if it felt like a good fit. And I
It was not scary. We were not scary.
I mean, I get scared very easily. Like during the Zoom interview, my cat was crying, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, they can't hear me." Like I'm kind of a nervous wreck sometimes. But no, you were wonderful to work with. I thought the process was very, like you asked good questions, and it was very clear to me what you wanted. So yeah, no, I don't think this is a scary space at all. I think it's the opposite. I think it's one of the most inclusive, like supportive environments that I've experienced. So yeah, I would just say people should apply to this. And that studio space was a dream to work in. So.
And you mentioned the community aspect of it. And on this back wall, I wanted to just speak about this really quickly because I want to leave some space for questions. Are all of these moths? And people come in and they say, "Oh, Erica does clay too." But you want to.
I do, yeah.
Venture more into
caterpillars. I did those little guys, but yeah.
So these moths were created by the community during one of our summer festivals, and it was really funny because when you put it out to the community, you never know, like, you can tell there's a wide variety of styles, skill level, of ages. I mean, you can tell.
Yeah.
But I also was really impressed by some of people were here for hours. Yeah. So what, as far, I know that there was one that is a entomologist, I guess, like, right? Studies bugs.
Yeah.
So there were, what do you have to say about those moths and kind of like that experience involving the community?
Well, I was totally bummed because, of course, I got COVID in the middle of August, and that was, at the same time that this was set to happen. So I was very grateful that you and a group of volunteers swept in and you ran this. And I
came in and saw them, like, as far as like, were you expecting that? What were you expecting?
I was not expecting this level of like dedication and detail, and like they're beautiful. Like when you opened the kiln and it was like, "Want to see?" I was like, "What?" I guess I didn't know what to expect, but I really didn't expect that much like investment.
There was a lot of love. I mean, you could totally tell there's a lot of love put into each of those moths. So
personality, like there's a moth that is like, there's a crying moth, like a little emo moth with a tear. And I met the creator, Eva, I believe, and it was like, oh, they did such a good job with it. I really, as someone who dabbles in ceramics, and I do have like one or two moths in that collection that I made, which I think all of the other moths far outshine my own. So I was inspired just like seeing the results. Like, oh, I'm gonna try more. If there's a hairy moth in there that is so dimensional, I think they're amazing. But yeah, I mean, if you're into moths, which I think the people that made those are into moths, if you're into something, the enthusiasm it's very obvious. It was amazing to see them. I was just not expecting that much interest in moths either.
Yeah, very cool. It was really exciting to see, kind of like a labor of love. Like, I feel like the residency is always that. Like, you put so much work into such a short amount of time to put like a large body of work together that like it is definitely a visual representation of the labor of love. And I definitely feel like that carried over to the community project as well. So, but I wanted to open it up to questions. And usually, we're pretty loosey-goosey about these. Just, like raise your hand and whatever. So if anyone has any questions. Rick.
You know how much I loved your drawings. I think they were just incredible. I do not. Oh yeah, there is.
Did put one in, the biggest one.
Now my question doesn't make sense. I just I wondered why there is not more evidence of that all those wonderful drawings on tracing paper that you did.
Well,
as an example of how some of this was created.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, well, I will say the only reason this is here is because you and Elaine were both saying what you just said, which is why not show the drawing? And I chose not to show those drawings, mainly because that is the evidence of the drawing, because it's a cyanotype of the drawing. But I get what you're saying, and I'm not opposed to maybe showing some of those in the future in a different capacity.
well, I think there could be an entire exhibit.
Thank
It's
you.
that wall, yes.
Yeah, and that was really, I wasn't anticipating that as a response, because for me, as I was drawing it, I'm like, oh, this is just a template. Like, this is not the piece. But I think it's kind of like in printmaking, which I've did a little bit in college. Like, sometimes the plate is more interesting or more exciting than the result. But I like the cyanotype version of those, so I felt like this was like, I wanted to show at least one example of the drawing, so here it is. And that was at the request of both of you. So, yeah, maybe next show. I still have them all.
You sold it too, didn't you?
I don't, did I? I think this is not for sale. That'd be a cool surprise.
Any other?
Well, I have just dabbled a little bit in cyanotypes, and like stuck leaves on the paper, but the one behind you is huge. Now, how did you do that? How do you get? So that's just stuck on the ground or something?
Yes.
Or a table or something?
Yeah, so this was another two-person job, because this, like the slightest wind, of course, it will like blow away.
Yeah.
So I had to wait for a pretty clear day, and I actually had my partner helping me. We carried out the whole, and this is something, you typically want to prepare the cyanotype in relatively dim light. So we did this all in a garage. I put this out on the fabric. I also experimented in this piece when I was applying the solution, and it was still wet. I threw all this salt on the wet cyanotype solution, and it actually like did things like it would in watercolor. But yeah, I had to take this out like very strategically. It actually is flat. It's vellum, so when you lay it down, it will lay flat, but a little wind will blow it away. So we actually stuck rocks. All these little dots are rocks holding it down. And initially I was like, do I want that? And I'm like, oh, it kind of looks like eggs. It's a little cosmic. And it's based on a dead underwing moth that I found on the ground. And I thought it was beautiful, but I was like, I want to do something big in this. This feels sort of like an altar space, but
you can use like you take a photograph and you turn it into a transparency. Yeah. So, but I mean, do people enlarge the transparencies, or is that one way you?
Yeah, I think you could. Totally. Yeah, right. I haven't done anything with transparencies. I'm so analog. I like to draw this stuff and but that was like I had to piece it together. That's why you have all like the gaps. Yeah. But you could totally do that if you wanted to, go to, I think like Kinko's or FedEx probably produces negatives if you wanted to do that.
I know the first time I tried it, I had taken a class years and years ago, and I tried it this last summer before last. And I didn't realize that you needed to flatten it. So because I had these plants that weren't like fresh plants, and why isn't it turning out? And I go, duh.
That's the process, right?
So how did you do those? What are those?
All this stuff? This is just uneven application. Like I was just like, and I actually prepared this in a big bucket. So it was a combination of like painting on the solution, and then I just bunched the whole thing up and dumped it in a bucket. And some stuff didn't actually get cyanotype. Yeah. So it looks like disintegrating film or something.
Yeah. So, some of it was a little bit plant-like to me. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. So be imperfect. Don't be too careful, and then something cool will happen.
Yeah.
I guess. I have a question.
So you talked a little bit about, and I remember looking at your work before the interview and kind of seeing two different versions of the art that you create, right?
Okay, yeah, the other stuff.
Right.
It's not
I
here.
guess I'm wondering if this residency, do you feel like there's a path forward where these two ideas can converge, maybe?
I have been hoping to go down that route, and I think there is. I think there's definitely like an emphasis on like a sensual experience of the world in this show, and just like in the other work, which is like the more figurative erotic work. And I could foresee like a sexy scene through like a meshy, like some kind of barrier, and there are moths on top of a screen or something.
Well, there's this whole sort of ephemeral nature of it, and then there's the whole process is just kind of erotic. There's this sort of sensual sort of feeling behind all of the application of things, and the way that it either captures the level and the perfection to which it can actually capture the imagery. I think could translate really beautifully. So I guess as I'm looking at this and you brought it up, I was like, oh, like I would love to see that.
Me too.
Happen.
And I have done some like figurative work through cyanotype, more like drawings of bodies and hands and things. And I think it's just like a matter of layering and layering those ideas.
Because one of the submissions for the show that we had was a cyanotype drawing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I don't remember what I submitted.
And I was like, what
What
is this cyanotype of that before?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I know that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think there's opportunities for that, and I even thought about that. Like, I had an idea in mind for this show that involved like looking through something, seeing like a human scene, but then also seeing like moths on the outside.
Yeah.
And I ended up just feeling like I wanted to decenter the human entirely in the show. Like, I just want to focus on moths and nature. The bugs have taken over. There's traces of like, plastic in the ground, but I wanted to remove the human. But moving forward, I have like the backlog of like exactly that kind of merging. So I think it needs to happen.
Yeah.
So.
Kind of in that vein, how are you feeling right now with what you planned on doing versus what you ended up doing? And like, are you itching to try like something else a little bit more that you discovered here, or what? I guess like it's annoying to say what are your next steps, but like, what has this opened up for you in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, first part, like I had like plans and sketches, and like I took measurements of everything before I even moved in, and I thought I knew generally what I wanted to do, but of course things changed, and I had to eliminate, like I was so excited about these boxes that are above. I was like, oh, I'm gonna cover those in cyanotype too.
Yeah.
That had to be cut. So there was some editing that took place, but on a whole, I am actually like, and it's rare for me to feel this way, but I am proud of the way it came together, and I feel really good about it. Which of course there are some things that I would tweak a little bit, and like some drawings got omitted. Like I had this little toad that somehow I didn't end up putting in. So
There's
little things. Yeah, there are little things that I had to edit. But I think it opened up a new way of thinking about, I guess, scale for one. Because previously I'd been working smaller scale, and I think the panel and the grid, I love grids, but I'd never applied it in cyanotype. So I'm thinking more about, like world building and like more immersive kinds of, not like Meow Wolf immersive, but that
Always have
kind
to
of,
make that statement.
yeah, I just like that idea of something that's more of like, world building approach. I am thinking more about that there are things I wanted to try, like staining with iron and making my own inks. And again, like back to materials and the process and being more earthbound. I want to go down that rabbit hole. I felt really tired after immediately,
Yeah.
like after it was it only came together because I had a team of people helping me install at the very end. And then it was just kind of surreal, like, wow, that time went by so fast, and it happened, and I can do a lot in 2 months. Like, I surprised myself in that way. So not to humble brag, but I feel good about what happened. And yeah, I think like just what was just touched upon, this idea of like merging figure and moth and nature, like bringing more of the ideas together and overlapping is what I want to do next. And I'm also someone who likes to take breaks. I feel like right now I'm not doing anything. I am just like, I gotta think about it and let it stew.
You gotta hibernate.
But at the same time, I get very like antsy, and I already feel like, okay, I need to make something. Like, what am I doing? I need to make something more. But I want to build on this, definitely. And silk, I don't know. I'm really like intrigued by this fabric and different surfaces.
It seems like you're going more at the scale of the actual natural world now, and it suits you, and it seems like you should be taking up this much space. And so that's why I think that's great.
Taking up space, yeah, I like that. Because it can be very small and delicate, and yeah.
Especially with those silk pieces, like that is the tree, it's not.
Yeah, I like that.
You talked about that tree where when you first made it, before you rinsed it, it had the rust or orange.
It had orange on it.
Would there be any way to salvage make the rust color stay?
So, something that someone suggested, actually, Betsy, a poet, she's like, have you ever tried rust staining? And I was like, no, what is that? And then, of course, I Googled it, and that's something I'd be interested in redoing. I honestly don't know what chemical reaction was happening when the tree was creating these colors, and that's something that often happens in cyanotype, where you'll get these color variations, but then they disappear.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
What kind of tree was it?
Those were willow trees, but this, I actually don't know. It had very thick, textured bark. I don't know.
Yeah.
Have to try it again.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Any other questions? I did also want to just bring up, I know that certain people were like looking at the pieces over there. So those were also a community project, and in the YouTube we'll put it together and we'll have images. So those were a community project. Can you talk really quickly about that? And then the last part we'll just talk about the South Gallery super quick.
Okay. Oh yeah. So those two pieces, I was inspired by the Renaissance painter Giuseppe Arcimboldo, who, if you've seen, the Denver Art Museum has some of his pieces. They're like fruit people, and he like takes a lot of little pieces and puts them together to make a portrait. So in the cyanotype workshops, I showed people how to do drawings that they can print as cyanotypes, and actually yours is in the Live Fast Don't Die moth. So I wanted to do 2 moth portraits made up of lots of community drawings, and I ended up, there were like some very like gnarly, more like edgy, like darker, twisted drawings that became the darker, the nighttime moth. And I thought, what a great, like a great motto for a moth: "Go fast, don't die." Like that was so poetic to me. So those are all drawings created by community members. I just put them together, and the darker one I made the day of the show. So that was like the day of the show, it was still drying when I hung it up. And then the one on the left is like a hummingbird moth, and I took all of the sort of like flowers and those sketches that are more related to that daytime moth. But it's almost all drawings that other people made. And I have those transparencies. If anybody wants their drawing back, I saved them all. Because there were some amazing drawings that were made. Tattoo artists showed up. There's like cats and like pet portraits and like
Ruby's dog is in there.
Yeah.
She was the partner in my discovery of like, because we exposed them at the same time, and so it was like, no, too light, no, too dark, and then I think it ended up being perfect for her. And then lastly, you were talking about like Earth and experiencing like the Earth and going back to nature. I wanted to talk about really quickly curation of the South Gallery and your choice for the artist to show there.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted someone who was also like making work about nature, but making work, you know, at a very like visceral level. And so I asked Samara Johnson if she wanted to show in the space, and I was so happy that she did, because I think, you know, we're both working with nature and we're both working with materials in a very like tactile way. And I like the first time I saw Samara's work in person, it was this like, I didn't know what I was looking at. It was this very like gnarly felted horsehair wall piece. And I just remember being like totally like mesmerized by it. And that kind of experience of the work, I think also relates to my experience of the natural world. So I was just very, very excited to have her work in the space, and I know a lot of it was newer work too. Like, so it felt serendipitous at the time that you were able to come in and show us your awesome work, which is more like the horsehair. That's like a different material, and then there's also natural material or man-made materials that are mixed in with the natural, and you don't know what you're looking at, but it's a very like if you were to come across a carcass in the woods, it's like, you know, but also
I think the word that you used was goo.
Goo.
And I was like, oh, that's so good, gooey.
Gooey.
Yeah.
Oozing. It's like a different aspect of nature, because I think I'm very focused on beauty as a lure, and I think your work is beautiful, but I also think there's this like a little bit of a bodily, you know, there's that aversion too, which I like that interaction with like work that makes me uncomfortable, but also like draws me in, which I think that Samara's work does.
Cool. Awesome.
I kind of feel like that with the more erotic work. It's something that I don't openly, like in my family, we don't openly talk about. And so it's like untouchable, but I'm like so fascinated by the beauty of it.
Yes. So we have some things in common. The way we view the world. Yeah.
Well, cool. If anyone, like, no other questions, then we will quickly, like, break down the chairs. If you guys just want to break down your chairs and then bring them to the front, because this time is just really a walkthrough time where you can ask Erica specific questions about certain pieces. If you made a moth, you can take it home with you. If you have an animal to reclaim that was used in printing, you can do that, or any drawings. But yes, I just wanted to say thank you so much. Thank you, Erica. And thank you, everyone. And we will see you next Artist Talk. Thank you.
Thank you.